The NBA trade deadline gets all of the attention when it comes to in-season movement, but be honest, when was the last time an NBA champion made a seismic trade in the middle of a season? The Golden State Warriors haven't done it during their dynasty. The Miami Heat and San Antonio Spurs didn't do it either. The trade deadline is good at making good teams better and bad teams good in the future, but is rarely a helpful tool for great teams trying to become champions. The rules governing those moves explain why. Good players cost money, and championship-caliber teams rarely have enough salary fodder to jettison in order to get those players. Even if they did, winning teams win for a reason. They don't throw their assets around for rentals. It is the period after the trade deadline when contenders usually push themselves over the top. The buyout market, historically speaking, is where the best teams in basketball find their mid-season upgrades. The Philadelphia 76ers launched themselves into contention last year by stealing Marco Belinelli and Ersan Ilyasova. The Warriors have taken swings with players like Anderson Varejao and Matt Barnes over the years, while Deron Williams was an extremely overqualified backup point guard for the 2017 Cleveland Cavaliers. The 2008 Boston Celtics won a championship because they signed a bought-out P.J. Brown, and the Spurs and Heat did the same thanks to Boris Dio and Chris Anderson, respectively. Buyouts are a more attractive option for contenders than trades for several reasons. The most obvious is that they don't cost anything but money, which contenders tend to have, but a slyer reason is that the money it costs is typically far less than the player would have commanded over the summer. The Sixers got Ilyasova and Belinelli for prorated minimum salaries last year. 5 months later, they signed deals worth a combined $33 million. Most teams don't carry cap space into the season, and the ones that do are the sort of teams that want to get rid of veterans, not add them. Buyouts exist so that these veterans can showcase themselves for the upcoming summer of free agency, and contenders can allow them to do so for a bargain basement price. 3 ingredients are necessary to create a buyout in most instances: an expiring contract. Teams rarely release players on long-term deals because they'd have to pay them anyway. But there is no harm in getting rid of a player for the last few months of his deal, especially when that player can agree to give up some of his salary to facilitate a move to a better team. A losing team. This one is common sense. Good teams don't get rid of good players. But bad teams that have no interest in winning will usually do so if the player is older and willing to give up some of his guaranteed money. It buys the team some goodwill among players and saves them a few bucks. The only catch is that the team cannot re-sign that player for 1 year, so it has to be someone that they wouldn't want to bring back, which tends to eliminate young players. A player that wants out. If a player doesn't think he can make back the money he would give up, find a better role than the one he has, or simply doesn't want to move his family, then a buyout doesn't make sense. A team could simply release this sort of player, but they usually don't since, again, they would have to pay them anyway. So when a player wants to leave his current situation, has an expiring contract, and is on a losing team, he becomes a buyout candidate. We can accurately forecast 2 of those things. The third requires some guesswork. Some of the players on this list will be traded before they are bought out. Others will join this list because of trades. And some just won't be interested in changing teams in the middle of the season. For now, these are the best players who appear to be candidates for a buyout. Jeremy Lin probably isn't a starting point guard anymore, but he would rank very high on any list of best backups in the NBA. He is the rare buyout player who can create his own shot, or exist within the flow of an offense. He would be a great addition to any team looking for a backup point guard, or even a co-pilot alongside a lead ball handler who can shoot. He needs to be protected defensively, but his offense is attractive to any team looking for punch off of the bench. Vince Carter is a strange buyout candidate largely because he has never shown any interest in being bought out. It seems that to him, consistent playing time is more important than anything. He is the rare veteran who doesn't want to chase rings, but just keep playing in the NBA. He can still shoot from a long range, and his relationship with Stephen Curry dating back to his time as a teammate of his father's with the Toronto Raptors would make him an interesting Golden State Warriors target, but until Carter tells the Hawks he wants to go win a championship, we should assume that he is staying put. The biggest roadblock to a Dwayne Dedmon buyout is his role in Atlanta at the moment. John Collins is the future at center for the Hawks, but they might be interested in having Dedmon stick around as a long-term backup. It ultimately becomes a matter of priority. If the Hawks want Dedmon for a few more years, they won't let him go. If they know he isn't in their plans, then a buyout makes sense. His rim running and defense would be very useful to any team looking for another center. Robin Lopez deserves a buyout. The Bulls, routinely one of the NBA's cheaper organizations, probably wants to give him one. But the public criticism they received for selling Jordan Bell to the Warriors still stings to this day. They will do everything in their power to trade him before the deadline so they aren't faced with the possibility of giving Golden State another free center. Even if they can't, it wouldn't be surprising to see them hold on to Lopez just for the sake of optics. Nobody wants to help the Warriors. It's a shame, because Lopez could help any contender. He doesn't have many more chances to win a championship, so to see the Bulls keep him from the Warriors out of spite would be quite unfortunate. Channing Frye is probably beyond the point in his career in which he is capable of playing NBA Finals-level minutes, but he could still help a team win an early round or two with his long-range shooting. The real value Frye brings at this point is his locker room presence. He is utterly beloved by his teammates. Any team worried about their chemistry for the stretch run should look into Frye. Alec Burks can't do too many things well anymore after a series of injuries, but he can certainly still score. He can make three-pointers in an off-ball role, and he can generate some quick scoring for a bench unit. Star-heavy teams will ignore him, but a thinner group that needs help in the second unit could really use Burks in the playoffs. Garrett Temple won't do your offense many favors, but he is a valuable defensive player who can cover both guard spots and even some forwards. He started for Memphis earlier in the year, but with the Grizzlies falling out of contention, he is best suited for a bench role on a better team. Omri Caspi has dealt with knee issues lately, and he failed his major test as a contender last season when he flamed out with the Warriors. But he was a solid bench piece for the Grizzlies before their season fell apart, and he can do a little bit of everything. He isn't someone who should be relied upon, but if a playoff team has a spare roster spot and just wants to check off a few boxes, Caspi can still be helpful. Shelvin Mack isn't as exciting as Jeremy Lin as far as backup point guards go. He is perhaps the Webster's definition of a backup. But there are playoff teams with far worse guards than him leading bench units. Mack could bring teams like that 15 minutes of competence per night. Wayne Ellington probably won't be bought out. There will be too much trade interest in his services, and the Heat are firmly in the playoff mix. But there has been plenty of smoke around him leaving the team, and he has barely played this season. If Ellington were bought out, half of the league would line up for his services. Career 38% shooters from long range don't stay available for very long. He would have his pick of new homes. Enes Kanter is a lot like Channing Frye. It would be very, very hard to win deep playoff rounds with him in the rotation. His defense is too miserable. But he is a great locker room addition whose instant defense could be very helpful in a regular season or early round setting. If he isn't traded first, Kanter will have some options in his next team. Mario Hezonja is young, and the Knicks could probably be convinced to give him another chance next year if their free agency plans fail. But his minutes have been somewhat inconsistent, and it isn't inconceivable that the team grants him early free agency to see if there's a better opportunity out there for him. He wouldn't attract many contenders, though. His numbers remain quite underwhelming. He is more of a long-term project. Noah Vonleh falls in the same camp as Mario Hezonja. The Knicks might want him back next year, so that could preclude a buyout. But if he hit the open market, his game is a nice fit for any contender looking for a dirty work big man. He's played in the playoffs before thanks to his Portland tenure, and could acclimate to that setting fairly quickly. The Knicks just don't have much of a reason to let him go. Terrence Ross is a trade candidate, and the Magic have been out of the playoffs for so long that they might not have a reason to let any valuable players leave. But if their season continues to trend downward and they don't end up trading him, Ross could help any team with his shooting and athleticism in the playoffs, and he's played there thanks to his time with the Raptors. Ross would be one of the most highly coveted players on the buyout market if he ever got there. The Suns might like to buy Jamal Crawford out, but it wouldn't make much of a difference. He had so little interest in the offseason that he probably wouldn't want to leave a guaranteed job for the uncertainty of free agency. 2 years ago, teams would have fought to sign Crawford. Now, who knows how much interest he'd generate. Any he did would be based on reputation, because his play this season has been quite poor. Troy Daniels is a one-dimensional shooter, but that is a valuable dimension and he is quite good at that single skill. He has made over 40% of his three-pointers for his career and he has some playoff experience. He just provides little else besides shooting, and the Suns might want him back next year. Zach Randolph probably isn't helping a playoff team at this stage. The Kings are in the hunt, and his minutes have been very inconsistent, but he could be valuable to a young team looking for some veteran guidance down the stretch. If this is the end of his career, a return to Memphis wouldn't be crazy either. Season has just been too odd not to at least warrant a mention in this space. Kosta Koufos is in a similar position to Zach Randolph. He is on a potential playoff team, but he isn't playing for that team. Somebody else could use him, even if he isn't quite the player he used to be. A Trevor Ariza buyout is unlikely, and if he reached the open market, every playoff team would court him. But the Wizards are a strange and volatile organization. Nobody quite knows what their long-term plan is. It isn't out of the realm of possibility that they let him go and commit to a short rebuild. If he did become available, he would be the crown jewel of this class. He is a playoff-tested starter with a rare 3-and-D skill set. Jeff Green is the low-rent version of Trevor Ariza. If the Wizards commit to losing the rest of the way, he'll be granted free agency. He just isn't as good as Ariza. On some nights, he looks like an all-star. Most of the time, though, he is a poor shooter who gives inconsistent effort. He'd find a place on a playoff team, but he wouldn't be anyone's first choice.